Thank you. Let's see, first, I just want to comment on this beneficial effects of radiation. You know, this has been speculated upon, I guess, as long as radiation was known. My mother, when she was growing up, I guess people thought it was a good idea to treat acne with very large doses of x-rays, for which my mother enjoyed having various forms of skin cancer towards the later years of her life. On the other hand, you know, my brother, who has stage 4 esophageal cancer, benefited tremendously from a focused dose of radiation on his tumor. And so the better scientific understanding yields better health outcomes here. And one of the reasons that we really want to, you know, keep doing this research. Now, in regards to the hormetic effects, you mentioned the immune system is activated in response to radiation dose. Is there also evidence that this can trigger autoimmune diseases as well? Is there a danger there as well as cancer?
Look, I want to stress that we don't understand enough about low doses to even say, yes, there's this big hormetic effect. What I can say is, in the literature, you can find reports that when you treat with low doses, you stimulate animals to have a better immune response. Is there the possibility of autoimmune disease? You're absolutely right. That is a possibility that could come with it. So just as much as it looks like there are positive effects, there may also be negative effects, and that's why we have the need to do research at that low dose range.
Okay, and similarly, DNA repair mechanisms are modulated, you know, by various factors inside biology. Are there documented effects of radiation on how active the DNA repair mechanisms are?
Certainly, we know that the repair mechanisms are sitting there kind of raring to go, and when you irradiate, they go right to the site within almost nanoseconds to begin to repair. So the repair process is extremely rapid, begins almost immediately following radiation exposure.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that there is some, you know, scientific, at least speculation, if not research, that you may be able to treat astronauts with you know, drugs, for example, that they activate the DNA repair mechanism to make them more radiation resistant.
And NASA's looking for mitigators exactly like that right now, so you're right on target.
It's sort of an infinitely complicated problem. And now, I'd like to actually stand up in favor of DOE a little bit. It was not a completely thoughtless abandonment of this. And if I could have unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter.
Without objection.
A letter to the Secretary of Energy Advisory Board dated on this subject, dated June 23, 2015, which makes two interesting observations. The first one is that, quoting from the letter, it's highly unlikely, and I would say impossible, that a group of experts would, after review and deliberation of the vast literature in this subject, come to the consensus or come to a consensus, or that consensus would resolve this issue to the satisfaction of the regulatory authorities or the public. You know, this has to do with, is there a path to success here, even if the science became clear? And I was wondering, well, I'll ask you for comments on that. The second thing I want to point out is that this same letter from the CIAB says the CIAB does not believe that DOE should abandon its research on low-level radiation effects. And so although it expressed skepticism on a path to success, both in convincing the regulators and the public that this could be a settled issue, they did also recommend this. And so the letter is, I think, good, interesting reading for anyone you know, just trying to evaluate why the DOE went the way it did. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, so as a person that sits on a number of regulatory boards that discusses these and mostly makes advisory decisions, I mean, I think it is true to say that if you don't have data, then you always say, well, we can't imagine what we can get to solve a problem. So DOE is exactly correct in saying we can't imagine what it would get to solve a problem. But at the same time, what I'll say is I've seen policies change because of data. So things I never expected, like to have the limit for the dose for the lens of the eye, it's dropped because of new data and new results. It's dropped internationally.
The limit dropped in the sense of being more conservative or
being more conservative in that particular example, because cataracts were popping up at lower doses than people expected. And nobody would have imagined that happening 5 years ago. It was just not possible. So I think that it's easy for DOE to make that statement that things will never change. But the fact is, data do convince people, and that's why more data are needed.
Yeah, you know that it used to be popular to tune up electron beam lines by looking at, steering the beam into your eyeball and looking at the trunk of radiation, anyway. So I just want to, in the time that I barely have here, to bring up the issue of money. I mean, the reason that, ultimately this program was discontinued is this the stress that in real terms of the budgets in the Department of Energy. So I have a lot of sympathy there. And, I wish this could be, a uniformly bipartisan issue. I was very disappointed when the Trump administration proposed, I think, a 16% cut to the Department of Energy, and I was unable to get bipartisan support for a letter, urging against that. So this is, it is not only authorization that counts; it is appropriations, and I think that everyone paying attention to this hearing should understand to watch votes on budgets and appropriations and not just authorizations. I will thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a really great hearing, and yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman. I do want to